Hey, my friends, this is going to be great. This episode with Shasta Nelson is like drinking from a friendship fire hose. It's going to give you information, data, and some tools about how to build the kind of friendships and the kind of relationships that you're going to need. So get your pens out, get your paper out, and go after this stuff. This is the Arable Leader podcast. I'm Karl Martin, and we're exploring true, brave, kind, curious leadership, leading from your soul. Hey, welcome to the Arable Leader podcast, where we look at leadership from a deeper place. Leadership that's about mindsets and character and qualities, and not just about skill sets and tools. And I'm so excited to have Shasta Nelson with us today. Hi, Shasta. It's great to have you here. Thank you for being on our podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited.
And Shasta is like famous for friendship and famous for talking about what it means to be a friend in every arena of life, particularly in the workplace. And Shasta, you've invented some words, belongingness, frientimacy. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly.
You have it.
But friendship is your thing. How did you stumble upon that? Where did that come from?
Well, it's easier now to answer that question in hindsight, because you can always look back in your life and be like, okay, there's the thread or whatever. But I was actually a trained pastor in my first career. And it was in that space. It was such a laboratory of like, what does it mean to belong? And people would come, and so many people attend something like that, wanting to have the community. And so like, how long does it take before they feel connected? And what is our responsibility as a church to new people, and what is new people's responsibility if they want to connect and feel like they belong? And watching small groups trying to create belonging, and sometimes they would just be way too vulnerable too fast. And I was like all into the research around like, is this the best way to bond people, and what does it actually mean to belong? So really that was an amazing laboratory, if you will. And now years forward, I would end up feeling much more passionate about people belonging and feel much more called to taking that out to the world rather than waiting for people to come into a setting like that. And you see the downsides of like those kinds of settings don't always, like, they have limitations. They say you have to believe what we believe to belong, or you have to act certain ways to belong. So I became much more way more obsessed with like, what does it mean to really belong? So that's where I kind of took it out of that context and went into research mode. I started a website back in the day for like one of the first friendship matching websites, way ahead of my time. And that's just been the space where I've been researching, studying, writing books, and speaking for the last 15 years. So yeah, I'm pretty obsessed with it. I keep staying in it.
Well, let's dig in a little bit more around the friendship thing. I have 4 daughters, and they will say things from time to time. Dad, you have no friends. And I'll say, that's nonsense. Like, everyone's my friend. And I'll start naming people, and they say, no, you employ that person, that's not your friend. You lead that person, that's not your friend. That's a client, that's not your friend. And then of course I've found myself in this world where I have all these clients, and someone said to me once, they cannot be your friend. Your clients can't be your friend. There has to be a boundary, you have to be very careful around how you keep a professional distance. And I have kind of stumbled into this world where almost all my clients have become my closest friends. And that makes it kind of interesting and a little bit weird. Talk to me about your definition of friendship and what that really means for people.
Yeah, so much here, Karl. Well, and first I'll just say, we never send our kids to school and say, okay, you're going to school to learn. So I don't want you talking to people. I don't want you making friends. There's so much drama. It's just kind of like, there's a lot of nonsense that happens. Just stay there. You're there to learn. We never say that. We know that students learn better when they feel connected. We know that they are going to thrive. We know that half of life is not just what you're learning, but it's like who you're connecting with and how you're showing up, and social and relational intelligence. So the research does not bear out the advice you've been given. The research bears out all the way through to the end that we are better at our jobs, more successful, more productive, more engaged, treat our customers better all the way down the row if we feel like we have best friends at work, if we feel like we have close friends, if we feel like we belong. All of those different things matter so much. So we can like dive into the research. I wrote a whole book on that, trying to like surface that, but it's really, really big. And so what people are hesitant about in your case, I mean, there's 2 things that pop into my mind, Karl. One is we're hesitant because it might be messy, right? We have to put on different hats at different times. But I always say to people, You got married. That's messy. You chose to have kids. And we know that you didn't do that thinking that was going to be great for your marriage, but you chose to have kids and be parents. And you can go back and forth putting on different hats, right? You can be lovers and you can be parents. Is it messy? Maybe, but it's also really meaningful and it's effective and it's healthy. And so we can do this. Like, yes, we might need to train more. We might need to talk about it more, but it's absolutely worth doing for sure. So I think you're doing it the right way.
Thank you. Brilliant. Well, we're good then. So friendship in your mind is like a force multiplier in helping organizations become healthy and functional. Let's investigate that a little bit, because you've done research and you've done the data, and the data all bears out that if you can find friendship and connection, true connection at work, return on investment is improved. The whole thing works. Why do you think it is that people who know this don't invest significantly on the connectedness of the relationships within their teams?
Yeah, I always say if I can judge the health of a relationship by how two people treat each other, and we can get into there's three things that I judge the health of a relationship when we look at all the social relationship. It's positive emotion, consistent shared experiences, and mutual vulnerable sharing. So positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. We can assess a team, a culture, and two people in a relationship based upon how much they practice those three things. And I'm always saying I can determine the health of a relationship by how two people treat each other, and I can determine the culture of an organization on how the group treats each other. A culture is nothing but all the little relationships all combined, and it's the output of all of those relationships. And so, we know it to our core that we are going to show up more when we feel like somebody's got our back. We're going to be more engaged when we don't feel like, when we feel like we admire each other and like each other, when we feel like we're being appreciated, when we feel like we're enjoying coming to work and we're excited to connect. So we understand all of that. And the research like Gallup is 20 years ago where they said we are 7 times more likely to be engaged if we have a best friend at work. And I talked to their head scientist when I was writing my most recent book on friendships at work. And he said, we have had so much pushback to that engagement question. And he said, we've tested it with every other option. Like, do we have close friends? What if we have any friends? What if we feel connected? Because people hate the idea of a best friend at work. And he said, but the stubborn fact persists. Like that is the answer that correlates the most to engagement and the least helps reduce turnover. So we can be uncomfortable with it, or we can say, look, the research keeps proving this over and over and over. So let's, instead of shying away from it. I mean, I think we all have this fear of people just talking and gossiping at work, or favoritism, or, we just have all these little fears jump in. And I'm like, the organizations that teach and train healthy relationships actually reduce that stuff. You can have you can have an organization that's against friendship, and there's still going to be favoritism and gossip and all those things.
Well, you've got that anyway, haven't you? Every group of people is going to gossip. Every group of people is going to be favoritism. You're going to have that. You have that in a family. You have it in any organization. It's going to happen. Yeah. I mean, to what extent is this a trust thing? I mean, we do a lot around, obviously in our thing around kindness. It's interesting because true, brave, kind, curious. I don't get a lot of pushback about true because I explain it's about integrity, it's about authenticity, it's about honesty, it's about you knowing who you are and showing up. I don't get I get no pushback around bravery, courage, purpose, focus, go after stuff, make aggressive mistakes. I get almost no pushback around curiosity. Every day's a school day, learn. I get eye rolls when I talk about kindness. And the reality is, I think it's the strongest of all those qualities, if I'm really pushed. The ability to empathize, the ability to care, the ability to prefer the person in front of you. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is trust. And we say, there isn't, if you read any of the material, there's an equation that we use, credibility plus dependability plus relationality over selfishness. And the two bits that are most difficult are the relationality and the selflessness, right? The ability to prefer somebody else. But they're in the same muscle memory group. Yep. They're in the same group. The ability to give myself, to be vulnerable, to be transparent, to risk, someone knowing something about me, and the ability to actually prefer somebody else and to be stewards, not owners of everything, and to be generous around stuff. That's really hard for people to take on. my instinct is the greatest way to do that is to find someone that you actually care about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to find people that you actually want to promote, to benefit in this, and that grows muscles, which leads to trust. And trust is the currency of all great teams.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so fascinating because when I was studying and doing all the research, we were pulling in all the research for what makes healthy teams, what makes healthy marriages, what makes healthy friendships, why do we feel closer to some people? And across the board, all of them, including the models you just gave, which are really cool, are examples of positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. And so we see those three things. We can use different words. Every single thing, every other word we say we want in a healthy relationship is a synonym of one of those three words, an example or illustration of those three words, or an outcome of those three words, including the one you're talking about. So there's so much correlation when you're talking about relatability or kindness. Those are examples of positive emotions. And every single one of us we're animals. We will gravitate to the people, the places, the experiences, and the things that leave us feeling pleasant emotions. And I don't get pushback on that one in the workplace, but I do get that one is the lowest score. When I go in and assess teams and culture, they often think I get the most pushback on vulnerability in the workplace. And they often think, well, we don't want vulnerability in the workplace. And they just picture people sharing about their latest breakup and talking for hours and crying at work. And in fact, we can go into that all day long on how we do need vulnerability in the workplace for creativity and for brainstorming and for admitting we don't know something and for working together and saying I need help and all the things that make for a great team. But what's interesting is when I'm doing the assessment, vulnerability often scores higher. They're most afraid of that, but they're doing it better than they're doing positive emotions. So it's interesting on the kindness thing. It's the one that's definitely the one that if we were to push a lever to make the biggest difference in our cultures, it would be that one. And when you were talking, Karl, it reminded me of the research that I often quote where it talks about how, back in the day, our ancestors had to kind of when we have to make quick judgments about people, somebody would come up over the hill of our little house, our little tribe, and we had to immediately decide if that person was an enemy or a friend, an ally or a foe, and like we all have to make that decision so quickly, and our brains make the decision first. Is this somebody who's friendly? Are they with me or against me? And that comes down to kindness. It comes down to warmth. It comes down to how we're showing up. The second question our brains try to answer is how competent is that person? How bad of an enemy will they be? How much is this going to hurt? Or how helpful are they going to be as an ally? But the first question we answer is, are they warm? And I think that's so powerful because most of us show up in this world thinking we have to do the second question first. We think we have to lead with our competency. We have to be impressive. We have to be amazing. I need to wow you. I need you to like me. But the truth of the matter is that's the second question you're going to judge me on. The first question you're going to judge me on is, am I nice to you? Am I warm? Am I friendly? Am I kind? And that absolutely is effective to all of our working as teams and our customer service, like everything we care about, that kindness really matters. So keep preaching it.
Totally. And this connects with some stuff that I've been thinking recently around that whole trust piece. Play with this thought for a second. When we enter this world, for the most part, if we've grown up in a relatively stable household, family, our first instinct is trust. We trust everything. We trust naively, right? So we trust the tooth fairy. We trust Father Christmas. We trust everyone. We think our parents can never do any wrong. And then we mistrust somebody or something. And suddenly our worlds collapse, at least for a moment. The tooth fairy doesn't exist. I'm sorry to tell you. Your dad is not perfect. Something happens. And then it's almost like this crazy thing happens. Our predisposition to trust becomes a predisposition to distrust. So now we distrust everything because someone rejected us, someone hurt us, something happened. And it's the fight, flight, freeze thing in our heads. But the secret to great relationships and the secret to great leadership, I think, is what I call a far side trust. It's a mature innocence. It's like the ability to go, okay, I know that you're going to let me down. I know you're not perfect. I know I'm broken as well as I'm beautiful. And I know that these situations are not perfect and it's going to be challenging. But I am going to choose to trust you. I'm going to choose to prefer that you're going to be good. Because if you don't do that, you always hold back from relationships. You always hold back from team. You always hold back from creativity because you don't know where it's going to go. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but if it does, talk to me about a predisposition to say, I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to choose to like you.
Yes, yes. It's so beautiful. So much to say about this. Yeah. So one of the things that I teach is that trust isn't all or nothing. It's not 0 or 10, right? And so I teach positivity,
That's good.
emotion, positivity, consistency, and vulnerability on a triangle. And all relationships start at the bottom of the triangle. And as we
Yeah.
build up our consistency, so as we have an interaction, as we have a shared encounter, our vulnerability is the other arm up the triangle, should go up a tiny bit. So vulnerability is not all or nothing either. And I
Yeah.
teach it as incremental, healthy, piece by piece. And as these three things work together, so as you and I spend a little bit of time with each other, that's a little bit of consistency. We should get to know each other a little bit more. So that's a little bit of vulnerability. If we're both left feeling good, like, did he scream at me? Did he yell at me? Did he judge me? Like, okay, I'm building a little bit of trust, right? So like, okay, I would have another conversation with Karl, or if he were in town, I would go visit him and we'd meet for lunch. And then as we spend a little more time together, we get to know each other. And so my hands are going around the triangle, spending time together, sharing, getting to know each other and feeling good about that. And as we do those three things, we build up that trust. So trust is the combination mostly of consistency and positive emotion, but certainly the vulnerability piece is in there too. So it's basically like as you and I build a pattern. So that's what consistency is. It's a pattern. And we will deviate from that pattern at times because we are human. But our goal is to say, what's the pattern of this person? What is the kind of their track record, if you will? And that's where trust is built. And so as I experienced you in the last encounter and you're like, okay, I can trust you in this moment. So to me, it's like, I can trust you to show up for this interview because you invited me. And so I'm here. So I trust you for that, but I might not trust you with my kids yet. Right. So I don't know. But trust isn't all or nothing. And we have experiences so my goal is always to like trust to the biggest amount that's appropriate for the relationship right now, to assume that somebody's going to be warm and great and wonderful. And to your point, assume that everybody is a potential friend.
Yeah.
Nobody is waking up wanting to like hurt me today. Nobody's wanting to fail. Like everybody's showing up and doing their best. And so let me hold that potential. That doesn't mean that I need to go high vulnerability, high trust, but I need to show up and like hold that possibility.
Okay, let's maybe shift the conversation a little bit. It's rare that I have an encounter with a CEO or a leader who doesn't say something like, it's lonely at the top. Mm-hmm. You know, it's hard. It's, I don't know who to trust. I don't, where do I bring my stuff? In fact, Karl, one of the reasons I've employed you is I want to dump some stuff on you because I don't know where to go with all this stuff. And it almost feels like it's the new badge of honor. Right? It used to be busy is the badge of honor. I'm busy. I'm doing stuff. Now it's I'm lonely, and that gives you kind of an idea of how important I am, and I call it out quite a lot. But talk to me about that. Is it necessary to be lonely at the top? And if the answer is no, which I'm presuming it is, if the answer is no. Can we get really granular around how does someone who is in the top of, say, a Fortune 100 company actually go about building the kind of relationships that are going to sustain that leadership role and that person for the long term?
Yeah, we actually cannot accept lonely at the top. I go in and do leadership training because if there's anybody in an organization we need connected, it is leaders. When we feel lonely, we show up and we see more threats and fear around us. When we feel lonely, we are less likely to be empathetic. When we feel lonely, we are less have big thinking. When we feel lonely, we hoard more and we don't go out more. Like all the qualities that you want in a leader, we don't want lonely because we need our leaders.
Lonely creates fear. So it's a fear-based response.
Yes.
Okay.
So we absolutely need connected leaders. And that should be one of our highest priorities is helping leaders feel connected. The ways we do that, like right off the bat, is helping name. I'm actually thrilled to hear that people are admitting they're lonely. I've been in this business for 15 years, and that's a really hard thing to admit. And it takes a lot of vulnerability for many to even name that, because a lot of people think, well, I can't be lonely. I'm busy all the time. I'm around people 24/7.
Yeah.
Like I've got all these friends. Everybody likes me. I'm admired. And we don't realize that the profile of the loneliest people today are actually popular, liked people who have a lot of friends. Loneliness today, for most of us, not all of us, but for many of us, it's not from lack of wanting more interaction. It's from wanting more intimacy in our lives. It's not because we just need to know more people or go meet more people. It's because we want to feel more met or feel more known by the people that we already know. So for most of us, the answer isn't to go be busier or to go meet more people. It's to prioritize a few people. And I'm always like, just get a Post-it note And what are like the 3 to 5 names of people that you want to be closer to in 6 to 12 months? And then like focus on prioritizing those people. We're all busy. We cannot keep up with, all 150 people that are in our heads. We got Dunbar's number. We know we can like do 150 relationships, but that's what I would say. That's how many we would have on the whole triangle. The vast majority of those are going to be low consistency, low vulnerability at the bottom third, bottom half of the triangle. It's only a couple that you're going to move all the way up the triangle and prioritize having high consistency and high vulnerability and high expressed positive emotions. And so who are those people? And most of us don't take the time to actually name those people and then name those people. And the next best step, if you like, I'm guessing we all have very strategic leaders listening on here, is make a list of those 3 to 5 people and then ask yourself, I'm always like, take the, positivity, consistency, and vulnerability and ask yourself which one of those 3 would make the biggest difference to each of those relationships. So for some of us, we'd be like, that friend, I love when we get together. We pick up right where we left off and I always enjoy being with him. Well, that means it's got high vulnerability and high positivity, but it means that you probably don't have enough consistency. It doesn't feel like it's moving, like you don't feel like you're supported on a regular basis. It's a relationship you left off. You can pick it up, but it's not present. So you would need to increase the consistency. In another relationship, you might have a high vulnerability and high consistency. So you feel like you know each other, you've known each other forever, but it's like taking a toll on you. It's not rewarding. It's not enjoyable. It's not fun. It's heavy. When he calls, you look at your phone and you go, ugh. So that means it needs more positivity. So you can start assessing like which one of these 3 levers would make the biggest difference in each relationship. And then you start being super strategic about how you can fix that pattern in that relationship to make it more meaningful, rewarding, resilient, all those good things.
And I guess you can't, the transformation you want to see out there is the transformation that has to happen in here. And so you have to be that person as well as expecting that stuff. I've just spent a weekend playing golf, which I like to do. But I was invited to play golf with a bunch of, I think it was 12 guys who, and this is just to encourage you a little bit, I think. They've been playing golf together for 36 years. They take a weekend every year. They come together. They've been friends. They have a daily Wordle text link. They talk to each other, and they showed me their text link. Sometimes it's 30 or 40 different. It feels like, and this, I hope this doesn't sound sexist. It feels very it's very unusual for guys, I think, to have that kind of closeness and that kind of regularity but there's something incredible about the way they went around the room. We talked, and I was doing a keynote, and they said, the fascinating thing is it's not that we haven't had problems in our marriages. Many of us have had difficulties, but each one of us is still with the person that we married 35 years ago, 32 years ago. There seems to be a connection between your ability to be faithful and your ability to be consistent and intimate and all the things that you talk about in one area of life to your ability to be in all these other areas of your life. So this is gold. I mean, I'm loving this conversation. I
love hearing that story because when I teach men a lot of relationship stuff, we often have examples of men who have been taught, as a culture here in the United States, we have done a huge disservice to men. We have modeled, encouraged, and taught that men should do relationship with positivity and consistency, which is get together regularly and have a good time. So going and playing golf or being a part of a poker club or getting together with your high school friends and doing sports, that's all acceptable. But most men are lonelier because they don't know how to implement that vulnerability piece. We have basically modeled and told men in no uncertain terms that the only appropriate place for them to be vulnerable is with romantic relationships. And so this is one of the reasons why we see women being the emotional receptacle for so many relationships and why we see women kind of holding that vulnerable place for men because they don't often do that with their other male friends. So I am like always asking men, like, we're going to have to change this. You're dying younger than we are. You're having to jump from romance to romance. When there's death or divorce, they have to jump back into another romance just to be seen and have vulnerability again because they haven't built the male friendships in their life. So this is a really big issue. And I love seeing men who are like willing to do it differently than it's been modeled to them. So that is fabulous.
Yes. It's fantastic to watch. Let me ask one final question because I get waved at and we need to finish.
But oh my goodness, it's gone so fast.
Here's the question that I'm trying to get to. I feel like we've been over-taught boundaries. in our current culture, particularly this rising generation. You know, I was having a conversation with someone who was trying to parent their child, and their 3-year-old child, I think it was a 3-year-old child, was saying, space, give me space, you know, because they've been taught quite helpfully boundaries. I need my boundaries. I need my boundaries. I need my boundaries. My instinct is if you teach walls without gates, we're going to create for ourselves a really unhealthy relational ecosystem. And, you know, in my book, I talk about walls, gates, and different areas that people come, the Holy of Holies, the temple court, the castle courts, the marketplace, and then your enemies. Talk a little bit to me around maybe some very practical things. Is how do you invite people up into intimacy rather than just remove people from as a barrier and as a protection?
So we now know that if we want to build deep, meaningful, close relationships, what I call frientimacy at the top of the triangle, which is platonic intimacy, we know it takes about 200 hours to move up that triangle. We self-report that the people we feel closest to, that we feel like know us, and that takes 200 hours, which is a crazy amount of work. So I'm always saying to people, like, when you have 50 hours invested, when you have 100 hours, when you have 200 hours, when you have 25 hours invested, it's almost always better to have what I would call, quote, an awkward hour, needing to negotiate and talk about and share expectations and share if somebody's disappointed you and to share if somebody's hurt you. It's almost always better to have a few awkward hours and then to keep building that relationship than it is to go start all over. What I notice in my work is that one of the reasons we're so lonely is because we don't know how to handle conflict with each other. We don't know how to manage disappointment. And one of the quotes I start my second book, Frientimacy, with, I say, none of us want to be in relationship with people who hurt or disappoint us. ... And yet there are no other kind. And I think about our marriages, and I think about those men who you shared were all still in marriages. It's not because they hadn't gone through hard times together. It's because they had gone through hard times together and made it that made them feel close and safe with each other and in their marriages. And so often in our friendships, we feel like when it gets hard or exhausting, or we feel like we have boundaries or they have boundaries, we just pull away. And to your point, we absolutely need gates. We absolutely need times where we sit down and say, okay, this is what I'm feeling like I need. What are you feeling like you need? How can we make this work for the two of us together? And we absolutely need to learn how to negotiate our friendships better, much more like we do our marriages. We understand that our marriages take work. We understand we're going to disappoint each other. We understand we're going to show up and have different opinions and fail each other. And yet we're going to show up and be like, I didn't like it when you did that. That didn't feel good. And we're going to have those conversations. Do we love having them? No. But do they help us feel safer, closer, build that trust that we know matters? Absolutely. So yeah, part of my work is reminding all of us that we have to learn how to figure out how those boundaries go up. And some of us as women, we need to learn how to state our boundaries better. But a lot of us, to your point, we need to actually learn how to be like, and when our boundaries don't meet up, what do we need to do? How do we make those gates? How do we sit down and make this work for both of us in a way that reaches our values, like being value driven.
So creating what I would call safe places to have dangerous conversations.
I love that.
And then the other thing that I heard someone say once, which I've coined and pretended is mine, because that's the way I operate, a problem only continues to exist in the absence of the right conversation. So work out, what conversations do we need to have? What's the name of the conversation we need to have? And how do we need to have it? Because it is... it's fascinating, isn't it? You said, 200 hours is a long time to invest. And yet most of the people that I coach don't think that 10,000 hours is a long time to invest in a skill they're trying to develop to become the best in the world at something. And yet actually we're relational beings, right? We're relational beings. We're made for relationship and in relationship. And so the ability to invest hours and hours and hours in this is, I think, the force multiplier in becoming the kind of human that becomes the kind of leader, that becomes the kind of team, that becomes the kind of organization that we all want.
Yes,
Shasta, we could talk for hours, and I really hope you come back on again and we can have a different conversation or a developed conversation. But I'm so grateful for having you here. Thank you for taking your time. And I know that this is going to be, guys, I know this is going to be super valuable. Look, the truth is not what is said, the truth is what is done. So talking about it is talking about it, doing it is doing it. So applying some of these things, going back over this recording and going, okay, so how do I do that is going to be the catalyst into you becoming the kind of leader you need to be. Shasta, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for all the good work you're putting into this world.
You've been watching The Arable Leader with Karl Martin. Subscribe for more episodes with great leaders. And you can also listen to The Arable Leader wherever you get your podcasts. For more resources for leading in a healthy way, visit arableco.com and check out Karl's new book, The Cave, the Road, the Table, and the Fire.